Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode, we will cover our spring 2022 top 5 anime list, after which we will give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Btooom. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic, and with me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, timecodes in the description below. We will be having, if you're listening or / watching this on YouTube, if you want to listen to the entire podcast, please visit our podcast channels on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, so that you can get the full Jay and Sam experience. Now, without further ado, we shall be going on to Jay's pick, which is known as Btooom. Now, Jay, tell us a little bit about this anime and why you chose it for us today.
I chose it out of pure interest of how stupid the name is, because, again, when you look at the title of an anime, it's supposed to be some kind of indication of what it's about. And if you didn't know that Btooom is the sound of a bomb going off in, literature, then you don't really know what Btooom would be. So, it's Btooom with the exclamation point, because it's an onomatopoeia for the explosion of a grenade, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And this has so many SAO vibes that I'm surprised that no one talks about this as frequently as they talk about SAO, because it's basically the same premise. But a little background, this is based off of a manga series that ran from 2009 to 2018, has 26 volumes, so if you find it interesting enough, there's enough to really catch you up on, because the anime only covers about the first 50 chapters, so it's not very well paced out in that kind of way. So there's a lot more to the story than you get from the anime. So this falls into the genre of action survival. If you want to go into a subgenre, it's basically a death game. And the anime itself was produced by Studio Madhouse for 12 episodes that were a little bit early for the 10-year anniversary, but it premiered originally on October 4th, 2012, and you can watch it on Crunchyroll. And the premise of it is that Sakamoto, who is a unemployed 22-year-old, is the world's top player of the online fighting game known as Btooom. One day he wakes up on a tropical island and realizes that he is trapped in a real-life version of the game that he knows and loves, alongside his in-game wife. And that's basically it. The thing that really caught my attention, other than its stupid name, is that this is just a more gritty version of SAO. But Sam, have you heard about this before?
I watched a little bit of it when it first came out.
Oh, wow. So, okay, you're one of those few. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I want to say, as I'm watching it, there was another anime that came out around the same time. For instance, there's a scene in the back of my head. I don't know if it's later on in this series or not, or if it was a totally different anime. I've been meaning, I was looking for it, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it to put it on the video edit for YouTube. But there was this scene where these characters, they were trapped in this Stonewall Fortress. They have to break out and get out of it, and it's on the edge of a cliff, on an island. I don't think it's necessarily Btooom, because now that I think about it, I feel like it was more of a fantasy thing. But I do remember watching it around the same time as Btooom. But I did enjoy it, and I do believe I was watching Btooom in university. I don't think I finished it, but I did follow it for some time.
Okay, so you have a previous impression of it. So this is somewhat of a, like I said, a death game, but it does explore something that I have never ever seen before, with the combat system being based off of bombs or grenades. So in the first episode, or in the first 3 episode test, we see a couple of different kind of bombs, and you can't really say it's a first person shooter, because I don't actually know how would an online game like this actually function. You see a visualization of it in the first episode. That's kind of the opening scene of the anime that they're in like mech suits or they're in mech armor and they're running around a field field where you're like kind of in a first person perspective or in Counter Strike essentially, but you're throwing grenades. And then there is a moment later in the first episode where it's commented on because he plays the video game very well. He does throwing grenades very well. So it's like a translatable skill. So like the hard comparisons between this and SAR are so apparent. But while SAO is the more kidified version, the more kid-friendly version of this is very much of a darker, gritty kind of version. It's even visceral, where at the very end of the first episode, the main character Ryuta blows up an opponent, and you see the body bits floating in the ocean. So you get very much the hard-coded consequence of playing this game in real life, where SAO, you don't really know if people are dying. They get, they can disappear from the game, but you actually, it's implied. Yeah, but this, you get the real hard-hitting facts that, yes, you're in a death game, and yes, you do need to kill people. Because it's set up where they're sent to this island. They're supposed to collect 8 player crystals, essentially, that have been embedded inside their hands or somewhere in their bodies. And it just goes from there and gets really dark from there, essentially. So did you find it at all? I guess my whole point about this was that, do you find this a better version of SAO, or is this a poor comparison?
I would say it's a better version in the sense of I would definitely say it's better in the first sense coming that it parallels video games very, very well. Because I remember when this came out during the hype of Call of Duty. When I think it was like Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 3 back in that day, where it was very, very popular. So the gameplay that was happening, as you said, like you get a battleground sense or a Counter Strike. So as far as like a third person or first person, you could probably do either or. And how the game managed, whether or not you can marry in the game, like it seems like the game itself, it mirrored what's the name? It mirrored SAO's Phantom Bullet Gun Gale, in the sense that you have this main hub world and then you can go off and do missions, things like that. But as far as gameplay goes, like it seems like you can, like it seems like it definitely took notes and cues on how fighting shooter games operated. I would also say um it's funny too, because looking back on it, like we're like in our day, right? You can make a living off of playing video games, whereas back then, or even in our high school, but they had tournaments for video games. They had Halo tournaments near and around my high school, but those type of prizes, they weren't very much cash prizes. You could probably get like maybe $1,000 to $2,000 for like a regional prize money. Whereas nowadays you have League of Legends tournaments that can sell out stadiums, right? So when we see Sakamoto's plight, how he wants to work for the company that makes Btooom, we it's if you think about it in that mindset, that like back in his day, like nobody took it seriously, then you can understand it. But then again, still, like he was the number one player, so the fact that the company didn't want to do anything with him, or like much less endorse him, that was kind of weird. But it did very, very well, and I liked how they went into the character's background, especially Himiko, and what all that she had to go through, and how she's having to how she's having to grow up very fast on this island in order to protect herself. What about you, Jay? Like, you've compared it to SAO so much. So what is it that Btooom does right that SAO didn't get, and what is it that SAO did right that Btooom didn't do?
That's hard to distinguish, like without watching the full course. of
Yeah.
the run of the first season, because we watched the first season of SAO with a special guest. But for these first
Hmm.
3 episodes, there is a hard stance that the anime takes, which I don't really find that likable or pleasant, that they
Yeah.
definitely cast gamers in this very negative light, which I think maybe is of the time. It's, as you were mentioning, that competitive gaming wasn't really a thing yet, or at least didn't have its popularity or wide acceptance in the public media. But
Yeah.
they definitely sell you the idea in these first 3 episodes that gamers are garbage people. And they go a little bit too dark and heavy into Himiko's background, because her friends gets physically assaulted in one of her flashbacks. She gets physically assaulted in the present on the island. And every gamer that you come across, or every participant you come across, is a murderer, like right off the bat. Like, this isn't into the game, it's just like right off the start. So in
Hmm.
the first episode, you get the perspective of Sakamoto being on the island for the first day. You get, in the second episode, Himiko's perspective on the same day. So, like, and they meet at the very end of the first episode and second episode. So you get a very interesting split of personalities to show that they're going to be probably like equal to main characters. But everyone you come across is a well, not a mass murderer, but in the second episode, like, there's a team up, but people are greedy for
Hmm.
food, and someone gets murdered, or their throat gets sliced open very viscerally, you would say, graphed. And then she runs off with another character. They're like, oh yeah, we have to get away from that crazy killer. And then the guy she runs away with also tries to assault her, and she has to end up
Yeah.
killing him as well. So there's just like this negative perspective on gamers that play these kind of video games, that they're violent individuals. And I don't really care for that narrative. So, like, if you're a gamer and you know how, it's such a beloved hobby or pursuit, and you know the kind of people that gamers are, then you're going to very much take a negative perspective on this, because there are many anime in this genre that does do the portrayal of video gamers appropriately. So
Hmm.
I'm very mixed on this, but with the SAO kind of comparison, to go back to your question, Sam, is that you don't really get a sense of the type of gamers that they are inside of Soul or SAO. They're just
Yeah.
people, I guess. So they're not really characterized as gamers. There's not really much to it to that.
Yeah.
So it's like Btooom takes the negative approach of showing that people that play violent video games are violent and are capable of extreme violence when given a chance, while SAO kind of just blankets over them being gamers inside of the game. So it's kind of hard to balance the two. But how do you feel about that?
I'm not necessarily sure if that's something that they're trying to sell. I guess because you realize that, and that this is revealed in the third episode, that the people who are putting on this death game, they are the same company that makes Btooom. So, in that sense, the people who make the violent video games could be the antagonist. However, even though we've seen Sakamoto and Himiko, so far those are the only two gamers that we know about. For instance, the first three individuals that Himiko runs into, one of them that was able to find them without having the use of the jewel. So he was like his either his profession, whether it was via military or via gangs, he was a tracker. He knew how to track, right? So, going back to your statement earlier, how in this your real world experience could definitely come into play in regards to the game. And even with the other guy who assaulted Himiko, he didn't know about the game, but I guess, like, he was able to think or figure out what to do with the jewel shard in order to find other people. So he thought in terms of a gamer, but that didn't necessarily mean that he was a video gamer. Another instance, the old man that Sakamoto runs into, he doesn't play video games at all, but he is wise enough to have a trump card to make Sakamoto respect him so that they can have a partnership on equal terms. Going back to what you said, that you think that this is pushing that people who play video games are violent. We see Sakamoto's reaction to all of this. and not wanting to do it. For instance, he almost he really debated killing the person that was trying to kill him, and he felt awful about it. He really hates it, and even though he knows that this is based off the video game, he doesn't really think that people would do the same tricks that they would do in the video game in real life. For instance, there was a care package, and he was running towards the care package. He sees somebody else get to the care package first. He sees them blow up, and he was shocked by the fact that the care package was rigged. He didn't think that, people would use those same tactics that they would use in the game. Like, he still separated the game versus reality, and he's having to come to grips with having to blend those two worlds together in order to move forward. So it's definitely making you look at violent video games in a different way, but I don't think it's necessarily trying to make the case that violent video games make gamers violent. It maybe makes you want to question those who make violent video games, but uh, again, I don't think they're trying to make the point that you mentioned earlier.
And the other thing that
Mm-hmm.
does lead into like how dark the series is, especially, is that they're done by Steel Madhouse, and Madhouse is known for a lot of big name properties. But the one that I kind of parallel this most to is Death Note. And one, like, the character kind of has this light Yagami kind of character design to him as well, but like with certain animations and the shading,
Mm-hmm.
the whole first episode essentially happens in the dark, and there's a lot of allusions to his life as a hikikomori, which we've talked about before. Just means like shut in essentially. And there's like this very short moment when you see his mom, and she was trying to set up a job interview for him, and she seems like almost like a zombie, essentially. So it does lead into a lot of things that kind of gamers have to deal with from a I don't know, not persecution but discrimination standpoint, is that all gamers are shut-ins, they don't have any real life friends. So there's like things outside of just the violent video games make violent people, or that people play violent video games because they want to be violent. But yeah, it is a thing of, they do a lot of not virtue signaling, but in the first episode he like throws up after he kills the guy, so you have a reason to root for him, that you have a reason to say like he's our hero, even though he has to commit violence. He is a good person from a standpoint of that, but he is, like, again, shown as a hikikomori, meaning like he has this kind of culturally inappropriate behavior towards video games or towards his own life. And I think that's a lot to do with like the animation. So like if you go into the just genre that goes into like battle royale, liar's game, even Gantz that we talked about a little bit before. But yeah, it's like a certain archetype that you want to follow in this. Like Kirito is like the power fantasy version of this, but it's definitely like a negative kind of archetype. But yeah, what were you going to say?
No. I was going to make a point that you had mentioned. So yeah, going back to, as I said before, like or as you had mentioned, virtue signaling, in the sense that he vomited after that realization that he killed somebody, even though that's not necessarily the same thing as him treating his mother wrong, or throwing his controller at her. That's still very much within the same vein. So like, it does make you question, if you sit and think about it, it does make you question his character a little bit. He can feel bad about doing that, but he can't realize the own bad that he's doing in his own life, and raging against his mom, who you said like it's basically a zombie, from, I'm assuming, having to work for both of them to ensure that he can still live under the same roof as she does. So, and like and all the way that he treats her, again, as you said, like it's very, very negative. So they do push the stereotypes in that regard. And you had mentioned Death Note. It was funny because I watched the dub version, and the dub voice actor for this for Sakamoto reminds me so much of Jesse Eisenberg. So when you had made that Death Note reference or that Death Note comparison, it's like I can see it because every time this guy talked, it's like he had this sort of elitist mentality vibe every time he spoke in the English dub.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, in our 3
Mhm.
episode test to get into the final verdict of the 10-year anniversary review, I would say like in the 3 episodes it ends with them finding Sakamoto and the older gentleman. I forgot his name, but they find basically a little
Mhm.
kid. So it shows that the cast is very much going to be a wide range. You have female players, male players, different age groups. So it has this very Dead Man Wonderland kind of vibe that I like to it, akin to that,
Yeah.
because in the opening they do the whole police lineup kind of sketch or introduction of the characters that you're going to focus on. So I do like that. And to say if it passes the 3 episode test, I'm going to say that again, thinking about establishing the rules of the world and the characters, it does a good enough job to make me want to follow up and see what is the intention behind the game company.
Mhm.
Because again, it's revealed in the second episode that they're the ones behind it. And same thing as with SAO, kind of introducing you to the villain of, oh, I trapped you inside this video game for reasons. This feels very much as a evil corporation doing evil things. So if you want to
Yeah.
do the Squid Game kind of comparison for the most recent version of this, and you're like, oh, what is their motivations? Why are they gathered all these people? Is there some kind of connection between all of them? And especially with like the different ages, and some of them are not gamers, like you mentioned, Sam. So I'm going to say that it passed the 3 episode test. But is it worth resurrecting or reburied? I'm going to say that Oh, I'm going to say that I would resurrect it just for the premise of how interesting of the strategic advantage of using bombs versus guns is going to be,
Mhm.
and what are the crystals actually capable of, because all we know right now is that they work as like a location device. So I think there's enough elements to make me want to continue this and watch it in my current iteration of my anime season. But how about you? Did it pass the 3 episode test? And would you resurrect or rebury it?
It definitely passed the 3 episode test, and it was funny because on the rewatch, I had forgotten how Himiko was beaten with the Charlie Brown stick in terms of her backstory and what all was going on there. So the fact that they gave her such character development and having to wrestle through this throughout the rest of the series, I'm thinking that the other characters who are on this island, for instance, Kiyoshi, the old gentleman that Sakamoto runs into, his backstory may be just as similar, or same thing with a little kid that they run into, where like I have good expectations that their backstories would be interesting, or if not, intriguing, or just as three dimensional as Himiko's character. So I would definitely say it's a 3 episode pass for me, and I would also say a resurrect again. But with it, I would maybe just give a little bit of a caveat because, as I said before, like it definitely feels aged. And if you were to watch it watch it now, you like the fact that he's an elite gamer and nobody picked him up, like that would not vibe with today's time at all. So they would have to definitely translate it, or something would have to be told to the viewer for some sort of context. But I still like, even though esports have came a long way, I still think like it's still under the radar enough to where people can understand the backstory, but I don't know how much longer that premise can last.
Right, yeah, because again, making the comparison between Squid Game and like the popularity that Squid Game garnished is like we're getting a second season. So like if
Yeah.
the 3 episodes, sorry, if the 13 episodes, 12 episodes of this does end in a way that leaves a cliffhanger ending where like the main character either gets off the island or has to go to, fight the corporation and see what's going on, or is this like a multiple iteration kind of thing, like there's multiple islands doing this? So
Hmm.
like how big is the game essentially? So I think there might be enough of it to pursue, but yeah, for sure, it's interesting enough and see how it's going to have a happy or sad ending, essentially. But yeah, that's going to bring a close to our 10-year anniversary. That is a resurrection for both of us and a 3-episode pass on both of us. So we had our talks about our top anime from spring 2022. Just want to give honorable shout outs to one that you said was Executioner Her Way of Life, as well as your boy Ko Ming, Tamagotchi Game, and Birdie Wing, which was a golf anime that I was surprised that I got so absorbed into this season. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. That's great. So once again, Timecodes. We've did a lot this episode. So if you want to get the full Jay and Sam experience with this weekend, definitely check us out on our podcast channels. And if you would like to continue to follow us, the next episode we will be continuing our spotlights on Production IG with our studio spotlight with the anime franchise where we follow a robotics club that took a page out of the Gundam's playbook. And this anime would be known as Robotic Notes. Now, Jay, with that being said, what have you got for us today?
Stepping away from lyrics that I've been doing for the past couple episodes, I got another English lesson for us because, as a teacher, I might as well teach you something. So, this is the word onomatopoeia, which it derives from the 2 Greek words that basically mean to make a sound. So, for example, the word Btooom is a onomatopoeia that is denoted by a collision between 2 objects. So some other examples are bam, bang, cling, clack, clap, clatter, click, clink, clash, crunch, ding, jing, nick, screech, slap, slam, thud, and thump.